can I just say, it's a real privilege for me to be here today because we hear that a lot, don't we? But just coming in and just seeing a real sense of family in this very short space of time to, met Pat and your twin drummers, Rachel and Naomi. Liam, of course, I know we've talked about our bus journeys and so on. But, your treasurer, Pat, obviously David. David I'd seen before a little bit.
I think the mic's not on it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, did you switch it on?
Oh,
About the same, yeah.
is it loud enough or is it, that's...
Is it on? Or?
You need it on.
Is that better for you?
Yeah.
But is that too loud?
No.
No? Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah, so the reason I mentioned the family bit is because for all of us, if church isn't family, then we're missing really something important, aren't we? And I had a quick look on your Facebook page and the website just to see what Collydean Granary was like, because I wasn't sure before I came. And I thought, shall I wear a tie? Is it going to be a suit? Is it going to... And then I saw David, and everything became clear. I know what I mean is, I felt I could be relaxed coming here. Not scruffy, but I can have a shirt and some shoes, etc. And obviously I know Liam as well. So today, maybe I should just introduce myself very briefly. I'm here with my wife Julie. We live in Dunfermline. David's quite right. My name, Demetriou, originally is a Greek name. My parents were originally were from Cyprus, even though I was born in Britain. And it's a special day for me particularly because Theo's here. We don't see each other that often now because we live quite a distance apart. My son Theo's here. I've been in the Baptist church for over 20 years before we moved, and I married Julie, live in Fife. And I was an elder for 5 years at the church. It was in Chester on the Welsh border. We did a year of Christian ministry school in the States for 1 year, which was last year, and then we started at the Scottish Baptist College as well. So I said the final year when David asked me, what year are you in now? It's actually my second year, but it's the final year, if you like. I think they're allowing for something in the past to say, look, hopefully you'll be ready to do what you're meant to be doing at the end of next year. This passage that we're going to be talking about today is one that it means a lot to me. I'm just going to read it out to you. But in your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be ready or prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. And obviously it goes on. It's always good to see a passage the bit before, a bit after. But hopefully I'll fill in a little bit around that. And that's 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. I don't know about you, but I'm so glad that somebody actually told me about the gospel. It's easy to forget that somebody once told us, isn't it? Because we've been a Christian sometimes so many years. I've been a Christian for 31 years. So I'm 53 this year. And I was 21. And somebody, bothered to tell me. Now, I'm not saying that they just came up to me and told me, but somebody was willing to talk about it. And I don't know about you, but that isn't always the case, is it? Some people don't necessarily want to tell you about what they believe because they think it's a kind of private thing, that it's just between you and God. And of course that's true. It is a private thing between you and God as well. But what happened to, the passage where it talks about if you've got a light, you don't keep it hidden somewhere, underneath a bushel, as it says. It has to come up high. It's got to do something, hasn't it? And I think this morning I want to talk to us, I include myself, about being willing to talk about our faith and what it is. Now, I think sometimes after we've been Christians a long time, sometimes if somebody says, well, why are you a Christian? Liam talked about influences, and maybe our parents were our main influences in terms of the faith. Maybe they went to church for many years, and maybe as a result of that, we started going. And before you know it, you're in a groove, and you go to church, and of course, you believe. But this passage is, we can just go back to that. Is it? Oh, you got the. Thank you, Fiona. It says here, but we give an answer for the reason that we have the hope that we have. So there's got to be something about it where we're not saying we're Christians because we were just brought up in the faith. Because we all know, don't we, that if we live a second-hand faith through our parents, it just doesn't really work. It's great to learn about God. It's great to learn about Jesus through our parents. That's wonderful. But there's got to come a point where you make a decision for yourself. You're not living it through mum's faith or dad's faith, or even your grandparents' faith. Sometimes even your brother and sister's faith if they become a Christian before you have. So, in my case, in fact, it was more than one person that spoke to me about the faith, and it was over a period of time. And it wasn't a presentation of a gospel message. You know what I mean? Where somebody says, right, you're in sin, Jesus comes, and all that kind of. It wasn't like that. But when I reflect on it, whoever spoke to me in their own way, in a very personal way, whether they were young or old, did give me an answer for the reason for the hope that they have. And that did something in me over a period of time. And I don't think I realised what was going on, because Julie spent some time in the garden yesterday. It was such a good day. And we got some flowers from Dobie's, and she was planting them. Now, those flowers have got a top bit so we can see it, but often, when we're planting seeds, we don't see them, do we? And nothing happens for a while. And but even though we don't see it, something's going on, isn't it? Something's going on underneath the soil where no one can see. And we could say only God can see what's growing underneath the soil. We've been educated enough to know that seeds grow and it's eventually going to pop out of the surface. And in the same way, the seed that's sown in us, because somebody's been willing to talk to us, that does its growing in a place that often other people can't see. Sometimes we can't even see it. But the growing is happening, and it may take a while, or it might be quite quick, and then suddenly a shoot comes up. And what was sown maybe years ago is actually doing something amazing right now. And I don't want to embarrass anybody here, but I spoke to Danny briefly, who came in. Danny, where are you? Yeah, I'm not going to get you to stand up, don't worry. But I'm just an example of someone who's come to church for the first time. She had Naomi, invited me to come along. But who knows what's happened, for example, to Dan in the past, where there might have been a conversation or two that's led to thinking about what is life about? Who is God? And if there is a God, what difference does it make? And is it a power or is it a person? If it's a person, that suggests there could be a relationship, and maybe I can believe that he loves me, and that he's actually interested in my life, and therefore I'm going to take an interest in him because I want more. I'm not going to I'm going to take down my defences. So, for me, it's a vital passage. It's kept me. It's meant a lot to me over the years. I thought I'd speak to you about this today. And can I just say, how about you? I'm not expecting you to answer this question, but aren't you glad? You may remember key conversations you've had over the years with someone who's been prepared to speak to you about their faith, especially when you've asked a question. And that's quite key. We'll come on to that in a moment. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6, where Paul says, I planted the seed, Apollos, which is another leader, Christian leader, Apollos watered it, I planted it, Apollos watered it, but he says God made it grow. And I think that simple passage in Corinthians really releases us because we don't have to make it grow. We're never going to make someone believe, and nor is that our intention or our job. Our job is purely to be what the Bible calls a witness. And if we think about what a witness really means, it's not somebody who persuades, who has to feel they persuade. It's their job to persuade them to come into faith. It's somebody, if somebody's prepared to maybe shout out, what's a witness? If a police turn up and they want a witness, what is it they're looking for? Anyone?
Somebody that's seen what has happened.
Thank you. Yeah. Anything else? Somebody who's seen what's happened? Sorry? Evidence. So if we just take those two for a minute, somebody who's actually seen, there's been an experience. So there's no point in talking to somebody who hasn't had an experience, but somebody who was there when it happened. And there's some evidence. And if you think about it, what's happened to us in our lives, David's life here, or Liam's, or there's some evidence there. Something happened to David, something happened to me, something happened to you, that actually means that there's some evidence there. So people are looking at you and they're thinking, there's some evidence there. This person is a witness, not to Jesus who lived and died 2,000 years ago, but to something that's still a relationship with God through the Holy Spirit today. There's some evidence there. And I'm seeing it. And so when somebody comes to us and says, look, why do you believe? What is it about you that is a bit different? We've got a reason that we can say. Now, I'm going to just look at the passage. I'm just going to look at the passage just before our verse. So bear with me a second. David's Bible is just a bit chunkier and bigger. So I thought it'd be easier to read. Yeah, the book of 1 Peter is well worth having another look after today, especially in your mind after we've spoken about it. It's a book that Peter wrote to the churches that existed at the time, but it was scattered. It was scattered in what is now we know as Turkey. So people were in a strange and foreign land, so they believed something that the people around them just didn't believe at all. And he's encouraging them, amongst other things, to not be timid and not be fearful in any way about speaking up when somebody asks them to give an answer for the reason for the hope that they have. The passage or the verse that we've got up is under the heading "Suffering for Doing Good," and many of us can relate to that if we've been at school, if we've been at work, in whatever environment we're coming in. We may make some decisions that somebody thinks that was a bit odd. Why did you do that? You didn't have to take that position. You didn't have to speak up. That got you into trouble. I know you're being honest, but do you realise you could have not? You didn't have to say that. You didn't have to do that. And I know I can think of instances which I think it would just take too long to go into this morning, where I've spoken up about something because I think it was right. And then as a result of that, people have just taken notice of me that I've never spoken to before, because I did or spoke something that was right, and they knew it was right, but they didn't speak. I spoke. And so afterwards you have a conversation where they might ask you, they're curious about your life and who you are, what makes you the person that you are. And that is the opportunity that we have to give an answer. So it suggests that to give an answer means that we've had a question. Yeah, does that make sense? Obviously, to give an answer, somebody's asked us something. And in the context of 1 Peter, it comes under the suffering for doing good, where people are noticing you because you're not necessarily living like everyone else is living, there's something different about you. At school, it might be, look, Richard, you never swear. I'm not saying you should swear, but you're a bit different. Or somebody doesn't swear on the building site. My dad was a builder for all his life. He's 86 now. And there's something different about you, and so people will ask you a question because of your life and your behaviour. And that gives us the opportunity to answer. And I want to just point us out, even though we haven't got it on the screen, to the verse just before, where it speaks of, there's two different translations, but I'm going to read them both. They're both valid. It says here, do not fear their threats, because obviously Peter's talking to the church scattered throughout the known world at the time. And do not be frightened. But another translation says, do not fear what they fear. And that's important for us, because if we live lives where we fear the things that the world fears, there isn't much to distinguish us in terms of outward sign. And it's back to our light just being put low. But we're at church, and we're here because we love God, and it's because we want to see God's kingdom come. And obviously that means the light coming back up, and it means that we answer. Now, if we just look at the clip of the verse where it says, set apart Christ as Lord in your heart. Some of your Bibles might say, revere Christ in your heart. I've chosen the translation set apart because maybe it's simpler in its English, in the language. I think as believers, as Christians, Christ is in our hearts. He's certainly in the mix of what's in our hearts. But there's other influences, as Liam said. So there's parents, there's great teachers that we've had. There's an uncle that's always easy to speak to. There's a granddad that we always got great comfort from. There's grandma who taught you to do stuff. And sometimes we find other people easier to be with and be influenced other than our parents, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes our parents have worked away a lot, or they've been very, very busy trying to earn a living. So if Christ, we can assume that Christ is in our hearts, is in the mix, but is Christ one of the people you go to for advice and comfort? And if the answer is yes, that's good. Is he one of the people that you would go to when you want an opinion on something? And if so, that's good. But the set apart means that Christ is not in our hearts mingled in the same vein as Uncle Bill who could give us advice, your grandma, all these wonderful people around us. There's something that's set apart about Jesus Christ in our hearts. So it's true that God obviously does minister to us through people. That's why he's placed them in our lives. But the spirit-to-spirit relationship that we have with God means that the Lord Jesus Christ needs to be set apart. There's an opinion there, there's a comfort and a guidance that really matters above all else. There are circumstances when you may go against advice that you've received around you, because you know that God's spoken to you specifically about something, and you just have to go and do it. And it might not even be popular sometimes, or people might wonder, it's costing you, but you do it. So, I suppose the question is, who are we answerable to the most in that situation? And if we find ourselves defaulting to being fearful in those difficult situations, we've got a choice between that and defaulting to listening to the Lord Jesus Christ, in which case we receive his peace. There's such a difference. I would say that's a clue to whether we've got Christ set apart in our hearts. That would be a clue. If we're experiencing any kind of fear in a situation, and it might not be a physical fear, it might be a fear of an apprehension that really takes over, and you've got your mind going in circles, there's a turmoil in your mind, emotionally or whatever, that would be a clue that maybe we need to set Christ more apart than the rest of the people that are in our hearts that we love and are dear to us. And the reason I've just focused on that for a moment is this, because straight after the set apart, it says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason. So, and the bit before that we said, do not fear what they fear. So there's that sense in which, if we set apart Christ in our hearts, it dampens down any fear, gives us the boldness to be able to speak up. And I feel that, for me, when I read this passage, it means that we don't have to worry about what other people worry about when we open our mouths and speak. We can afford to be bold. Now, I remember when I first became a Christian, I was 21. For me, this passage was about having an answer, having it figured out, as in your mind, that kind of, where you write a debate and somebody says, give 5 reasons, and you're writing out mind reasons where you might use in an argument or a debate. But now that I'm older, I don't believe it just means that. For me, it was like, we've heard about Christian apologetics, where you give a reason for why Christianity is a good thing or why we should believe in Christianity. I believe this is something more than that. And I'll give an example. I went to, I was in London to visit my family, and there was a chap I spoke to, and it was purely by chance. I was waiting for this shop to open. He was a cafe owner, and he was just standing outside opening his shutters, and I just asked him what time this shop opened, and he told me. And I said, okay, well, that's a bit late for me, and I was about to go, and he engaged me in conversation, and I think I said something like, how fantastic it was that the blossom had come out on the trees, and I said that the spring is looking fantastic, or something like that. And he looked around and he said, yeah, he says, and I said, isn't it an amazing world that God's made for us, or something like that, or I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact words. And he said to me, well, I don't know about God, he said, but nature, yes, I've loved nature. And so we had a conversation. I said, well, I've got to be honest with you. His name was George. I said, I can't see how all this is here, wonderfully designed, and that there's no designer at the end of it. So I was engaging him with a debate of the mind, where he was, we were talking about, does it make sense? It was that kind of conversation. I said, look, the trees producing carbon dioxide, we produce carbon dioxide, which we don't need. The trees produce oxygen that we do need. I said, everything seems to work so well. For me, it makes sense that there's a God. It makes sense that there's but it was all done in light, it was light-hearted, literally on the pavement. And I said to him, well, look, we've got on the subject about what we can take with us when we go, when we eventually pass away, when our time has come. And I said, it's a bit like going through the airport, the scanner where it beeps if you've got anything on you and you've got to take it off and put it behind. And I said, we would just not be able to take anything with us when we go. And I did my arms up in the air. I said, a bit like walking through a scanner. And he chuckled to himself. And again, for me, it was about, does it make sense? And eventually he said to me, look, come in and have a coffee with me, he said. It's on me. So we went in and had a conversation. I won't go into that now, otherwise it'll be too long. I'm running out of time. But that's an example of how I think, if you like, which is to do with, does it make sense? And I was giving an argument in that way. But your reasons might be, if somebody asks you, when I'm on my own with God, that's when I experience peace that I don't find anywhere else. And we don't have to be a theologian to say that, do we? We don't have to have studied theology. All we're doing is being witnesses, as you said. And somebody hearing that is hearing evidence for the reality of God. Somebody else might say, God has proven himself to me. I pray and I've seen answers to prayer. My friend, Helene, was healed. Somebody else might say, well, look, I found that God has changed me. I love people more than I've ever done before, that I really struggled with. And I've forgiven people that I honestly thought I could never get around to forgiving. I just couldn't do it. And that would be giving an answer for the reason, for the hope that you have. Just as much as my head argument was with George. But it does need to be, obviously, your reason for the hope that you have. And there may be many reasons that you have that hope. And it doesn't mean that you give them all. It doesn't mean any of us give them all at one time. But, as David said earlier, if we are prepared in that moment to just listen to the Holy Spirit inside us, God will bring to mind the reason that you have to give in that moment to that person. So we don't have to have things off pat, so to speak, but we do have to have our own reasons. It's got to be personal to you. And that is not just enough, it's more than enough. And in that sense, there's no formula. Just being yourself, the way God has made you and formed you through the life experiences through my 53 years. For many of us who are slightly older, we wouldn't wish necessarily to go back and be in that stage when you're growing up and you're trying to find who you are, where you're not sure who you are yet, your character and personality is still forming. Many of us can take comfort from the fact that, look, it doesn't really matter if my answer doesn't go down as well as I thought it might, or we're sowing seeds. And that's all that God's asking us to do, to be witnesses in that respect. And to trust him in it. There's a couple of verses along those lines I think is encouraging for us. We've heard about sowing and reaping. It's in the Bible many, many times. And it has been used, Paul used it in terms of planting the seed, Apollos watering it and God helping it grow. When we don't have to worry or think about making it grow ourselves, it takes the striving out of it. We don't have to work on somebody, does that make sense? We don't have to work on them for the growing to happen. God does the growing. All we have to do is just be faithful, with the sowing. And there's a small part of verse in John 4, which I know David's going to be speaking on next Sunday, I think, if that's still on schedule, in verse 37, where Jesus says, one sows, the other reaps. And in Hebrews chapter 11 going into chapter 12, many of you would have read about all of God's people that lived before us, all the ones that are going to live on this, and we're right here in the middle. And Keith Green, the Christian singer, he says, this generation of believers is responsible for this generation of souls, but again, without the striving, purely to be witnesses, and not to feel that we need to keep our light low anymore. We can lift it high. And the older we are, we've got even more to offer because there's lots more evidence. And the younger we are, there's a lovely freshness, especially when we come to faith, that people just see in you. And they see that something's happened to you and there's been a change. I think it's fair to say and we need to be honest about this, that sometimes it takes boldness. And boldness is a big word in the New Testament. We hear a lot about boldness. When Paul was thrown into prison, he'd been boldly proclaiming the gospel. He comes out of prison, the first thing he does, he goes to the house of other believers, and he asks them to pray that he has more boldness. So there is that sense that we just need to take courage in those situations and say, look, somebody's asked me, do you go to church? Why do you believe you do? Or why do you go to that youth group? Or do you read the Bible? I noticed the Bible in your desk. Or you posted something on Facebook or something like that. Somebody asked you about it. And that's our opportunity to speak. So we're witnesses. It may be that somewhere along the line, maybe a few weeks, a few months, maybe even a few years' time, somebody else does the watering. And then God causes it to grow. Obviously, I wouldn't be standing here, they wouldn't be standing here if somebody hadn't spoken to us at some point. And I think I felt it in my heart really this morning to just encourage us to carry on speaking, especially as we engage in the community. It's a wonderful position the church has got here, embedded right in the middle. My first time here, right in the middle of the community here. It's just wonderful. It's just part of life, isn't it? Church. But it is a witness. Now, we know this, that it's not about the size of the church either, because any of us that have done any cooking realise that it's very easy to over-season a dish, isn't it? Is there any hands up who's done that before? Yeah? My mum, actually, when I was younger, I'm the eldest of 4 boys. When she was cooking, she used to call me for some reason, and maybe it was the eldest. Chris, can you just come and taste this and see if it's okay? Does it need a bit more salt? Because she tended to and I would taste it, and often it was underdone. That's the safest way to go first. And I'd say, Mum, it just needs a little bit more. And then she'd put it and I'd taste it, which is quite trusting of a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old. But you know what? When you actually if you look at the ingredients of that stew that we had, and you look at the few potatoes that were peeled by weight, your carrots by weight, a few bits of chunky beef that you put in, what percentage do we think, seriously, the salt needed? It was very small. Would we agree on that? Doesn't need many. One person in an office, one person outside the school playground, one grandmother, several grandkids, one church in the community. It doesn't have to be mega churches. We have to trust God to do the growing and not feel we have to do it. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to round off now. I wanted to pray for 3 things. If I tell you about them in advance before I pray, it just gives you a chance to gather your thoughts if there's something relevant to you, because I will then pray on behalf of us. The first one is just to pray for boldness in giving answers to people that ask you. To just be bold, not in any way be fearful. To pray for readiness. There's 2 pictures that I had for the readiness. One of them, for example, if we're a soldier and suddenly our commanding officer says, go, we're ready to go. And again, it's not about having pat answers that we pull out, but it's just being ready for that opportunity to think, something's happening here. I'm going to give an answer to this person. The other one is one of a grocer. That a grocer never wants to be running out of groceries, of food that somebody may come in to ask. And in that sense, often the answer that we give is a bit like food, because some people are asking us because they're really hungry. They've eaten what the world has had to offer. It's just not been enough. And they're hungry again very shortly afterwards. I remember that when McDonald's first came out, my mum used to say, look, there's no point in having that because I used to go home and be hungry again. So there's food and there's food. And when people are asking us, sometimes it means they're hungry. So I'm going to pray for readiness. For those of you that feel, actually, I never feel ready. When somebody asks me a question, I never feel I've got a right answer, and I'm kicking myself afterwards for saying something I didn't mean to say. And the other one I'm going to pray for is for gentleness and respect. Because we know that whatever we say is one thing, but the way we say it really matters. And if we ever believe that packaging matters as to whether we go for something, then I would say gentleness and respect is God's packaging. And we really need that, because somebody can not listen to what we're saying, even though it's good stuff, because the packaging is wrong. And I hold my hands up here. I certainly have spoken before where I could think of something relatively recently with a family member, not a close family member, but a family member, and he had all sorts of objections to the church, and we didn't fall out, but I reflected afterwards. I thought I answered, but I don't think there was a gentleness there in my answer. I felt like I had the answer. So it's not as though we're going to do things perfectly every time, but if we do things with gentleness and respect when we give our answer, it really does widen the door of the influence that Liam spoke about. It means that people are much more prepared to receive from you because of the way you're doing it. And not only that, of course, it gives them God's heart, the Father's heart, in the way you're speaking. They see something of the Lord in you. So those are three things I'm going to pray for. And there is one more thing which is slightly unusual. So I'm just going to go with it, because when I was preparing and praying for today, it just wouldn't leave me. So I'm going to just share it with you. I just had a sense that from this congregation today, Collydean Granary Baptist Church, that there would be 3 individuals at some point going into ministry. Now we know about Liam, so I'm studying with him, but I just felt that it would be wrong of me not to share that in case this was of the Lord, but it hasn't left me for the last few days. And it may be somebody younger, it might be somebody older. Like I said, I'm 53, we're just starting. I don't know if you know that there are, but very quickly, how many people do you think in the UK there are over 100 and over? Just quick guess. Anyone?
2,000.
2,000, that's not a bad guess. It's actually 5,000 people, over 100. And we know Moses started his particular, the main part of his ministry after he was got ready, 2/3 of his life in. So I don't know who it is. I've got no other revelation other than that, but I thought if I share it, just a figure that came to me was 3 people from here. We know about Liam. But if you feel after today, and after this morning's service, there's a stirring in you about this, and you think, you know what, I feel stirred by that. I don't know why, I hadn't thought about it. Or somebody's thinking, I thought about it, but I've not said anything about it. Or somebody's sitting here thinking, I've thought about it, said something about it, but I've not done something about it. Well, if I can encourage you to speak to either David, or Bill or somebody else here, in leadership, and just pray. Just explore it and see. Okay, let's just pray.